have seen it, I have felt it, and I have lived it. Every judgmental glance, every unspoken word, every subtle gesture makes it clear that even within our own community, there are invisible barriers. Barriers that should not exist. Because if history has taught us anything, it is that the enemy is not always outside. Sometimes, without realizing it, we allow the very prejudices we fight against to infiltrate our own spaces. And that is the most dangerous thing, because a community that fractures from within is a community that weakens. And we cannot afford to be weak. Not now. Never. We speak of pride, of brotherhood, of a joint struggle against a society that constantly rejects us. But how united are we really? How deeply do we accept each other? Homophobia and transphobia do not disappear simply because we wear the same colors, because we march under the same flags, because we share the same struggles. They seep into silences, into whispers, into the small daily betrayals we inflict on each other. They thrive in the way we categorize people within our community, in how we decide which identities are more acceptable and which are too much, in how we continue to impose models of masculinity, of femininity, of normality, when our very existence should be a challenge to all of that. I have heard those venomous thoughts, the ones that say that some people within the collective make everything harder for the rest. That if they were less visible, less loud, less defiant, maybe the world would accept us more easily. But accept us on what terms? On the terms of a society that has never wanted us? Under the rules of a world that only tolerates us when we fit into its expectations? No, we cannot betray ourselves like that. We cannot become the very thing that has harmed us. We were taught that to survive, we had to conform, that we had to be normal, that we had to fit into a diluted and presentable version of what it means to be LGBTQ. And many believed it. Many have spent their lives trying to be the most harmless version of themselves, fearing being too much, too queer, too visible, too real. But I have learned that our strength is not in conformity. It is not in making ourselves smaller so that others feel comfortable. Our strength is in taking up the space that belongs to us without apology, in challenging the molds imposed on us and creating new paths, in being so big, so bold, so impossible to ignore, that the world has no choice but to recognize our existence, not as a concession but as an undeniable right. I have seen how, within our own community, trans people have been pushed to the background, as if their struggles were too complex, too radical, too uncomfortable to be part of our shared fight. I have seen how machismo continues to be reproduced, how certain bodies are glorified while others are rejected, how we continue to apply filters of acceptability to people who have already had to fight too much just to exist. I have seen how the same mechanisms of exclusion that the world uses against us, we use against each other. And it hurts. It hurts because it should be different. Because we were sold the idea that once we found our community, we would find a refuge. But for many, that refuge has been nothing more than another place where they must prove their worth, where they have to prove that they deserve to be there. And that is not justice. That is not equality. That is not community. Unlearning what we have been taught is not easy. It requires courage. It requires a brutal act of introspection, of recognizing that many times we have been part of the problem, that many times we have allowed those toxic thoughts to take root in our minds. But it also requires something even greater, the determination to change. Because if we do not look at ourselves with the same harshness with which we judge the world that oppresses us, then we are perpetuating the same harm. And I am not willing to do that. I am not willing to be part of a community that marginalizes its own people. I am not willing to tolerate the hypocrisy of speaking about inclusion while closing doors from within. We do not weaken when we question our failures. We weaken when we refuse to see them. We weaken when we allow homophobia, transphobia, racism, classism, and machismo to continue existing in our spaces in new forms. We weaken when we divide ourselves between those who are more acceptable and those who are not. We weaken when we abandon the most vulnerable among us. Because true strength is not in homogeneity. It is not in presenting ourselves to the world as a uniform, polished, and edgeless group. True strength is in our diversity, in the wonderful chaos of who we are, in the fact that there is no single way to be LGBTQ, and there never will be. That is why I do not want to, and I will not stay silent. I will not look the other way when I see the same patterns of oppression repeated within our own community. I will not pretend that this does not affect us, that this does not hurt us, that this does not divide us. Because it does. And the only way to heal is to confront it. The only way to build something better is to recognize what has been wrong and have the courage to change it. I do not want a future where only some are welcome. I do not want a community that only celebrates certain expressions of identity while marginalizing others. I do not want a space where people have to fight for their right to exist within a movement that, in theory, should be their home. I want a place where no one has to question whether they are too much or not enough. I want a future where our fight is not about being accepted by a society that has never wanted us, but about building a world that belongs to us on our terms, with our rules, with our vision. And that future is not built with silence. It is not built with complacency. It is built with rage, with courage, with determination. It is built by challenging not only the outside world but also ourselves. It is built by tearing down the hierarchies we have allowed to exist within our own spaces. It is built by remembering that the true revolution is not just about being visible, but about being free. And freedom is not negotiated. It is not moderated. It is not conditioned. Freedom is taken, demanded, lived. We are at a point in history where we cannot afford to be passive. We cannot keep asking for permission to exist. We cannot keep waiting for a place at the table. We have to build our own table. We have to claim our place, not just in activism, but in politics, in culture, in leadership within this world that has pushed us to the margins for far too long. Because if we do not, others will do it for us. And I refuse to live in a world where we remain a footnote in someone else's history. It is time to take control. It is time to be more than a community. It is time to be an unstoppable movement, to be leaders, to be creators of change, to be the architects of our own destiny. Because no one else will do it for us. Because no one else has the right to decide who we are, what we deserve, or what we can become. This is our moment, our fight, our future, and I, for one, will not let it slip through our fingers. My name is JP. Thank you for listening.